election, where the day after, well, it wasn't even, it was the morning after, I just looked at what happened and knew that Millerman was on his way out, and I thought, if ever there was a time there needs to be some sort of comment, now is the time. And whilst I wasn't sort of arrogant to think that my opinion would make all that much difference, nonetheless I wanted to make it. So I sort of applied about sort of 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, and the results were coming through, and I realised what was happening. First of all, I got the usual standard letter saying welcome from the General Secretary, then I got my membership card, then I got the stuff, and then a couple of weeks later it sort of became public that I'd done that, and then I got a letter saying this has got to go before the NEC.
That's now the ruling committee of the Labour Party.
Yeah, it's now, what, 18 months later, and apparently it still hasn't been at the NEC.
Do you think anyone in the Labour Party wants you back?
Well, I haven't asked them all. I'm sure there are a number that do and a number that don't.
Because you were thrown out for being a member of Militant Tendency, a group which operated inside the Labour Party and which many saw as hostile to it.
Like the Co-op Party does.
Yeah, but that's somewhat different. The Co-op Party was seen as being complementary to Labour's values. Well, Militant Tendency was seen as being hostile to them.
Yeah, it depends who was seeing it. I mean, in many ways, that we were certainly not hostile to the values of the Labour Party. And you've got to remember that Militant Tendency at the time, it doesn't exist now, by the way. But
it's got a different name, hasn't it? It calls itself the Socialist Party.
It doesn't exist. I mean, it's just a different group of people. Some similar, some different. But the reality is that at the time, I suppose many people argued, and we would argue, that the people involved in it had been a member of the Labour Party for a long, long time. And that membership of the Labour Party was far more important than whether we read a newspaper or had meetings outside of the Labour Party.
Peter Kilfoyle, who went on to be, one might call him the hammer of militants in Liverpool, said it was a completely separate party. They were a very large cuckoo in the nest. And they've been compared rather as Lenin told British communists to join the Labour Party in the 1920s. As a rope supports the hanged man, so militant and Labour in the early 80s.
I've used that expression many times myself, only in other ways. Peter Kilfoyle, talking about entryism, I mean, he just came from Australia or somewhere. No one ever knew him in Liverpool. He'd never been part of the party at all. He just appeared as the hatchet man for Kinnock. Could have been done by anybody. He just happened to be Kilfoyle, and he got well rewarded for it, of course.
But what about his criticism?
Now, well, I don't know what the criticism is you've levied.
The criticism is that this was an organisation that had different motives. It had a revolutionary approach to socialism. It wasn't a democratic body. As others have put it, Jane Kennedy, later a Labour MP, now Police and Crime Commissioner on Liverpool, told the local newspaper about 3 years ago, she said Labour Party meetings were manipulated and dominated by this small group of people. They had a particular viewpoint. There was no discussion. They weren't representative, and their revolutionary ideas were
funny you should talk about this small group of people. I actually bumped into Malcolm Kennedy, her ex-husband, only the other day as a councillor of Liverpool. I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. They're no longer together. But he was saying to me that at the time, him and Jane and a small group of people opposed us along. Credit to them, they always turned up at meetings, always gave a different opinion, not like a lot of the other hangers-on who jumped on afterwards. And he was reminding me of a time when he led a walkout in my local constituency, a walkout of 4 people, and there was about over 100 people there. So this small group you're talking about actually was a big number and the vast majority within the Labour Party. And these were not members of Militant Tendency. These were members of the Labour Party. There might have been a small number within there who happened to read the Militant newspaper,
and you were one of them.
or go to Militant meetings or whatever. But the vast majority were good, honest, hard-working Labour Party members who actually went along the street, knocking at doors, putting leaflets through the doors, and campaigning for the Labour Party councillor or MP.
And is that a parallel you see now, as a large number of people are attracted into the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, the leader elected only a year ago with 60% of the vote, and yet finding that he's now opposed by 80% of the party's MPs and challenged again? Lots of new people coming into the party. Some people are suspicious of those parties.
I think a lot of people are suspicious about what's happening for all sorts of different reasons. I think the one really encouraging thing at the moment is that you're starting to get a politicisation around the country, where you're getting not just within the Labour Party, but within pubs and within discussions. I mean, I've just come away now from a discussion with someone who's not at all political, but immediately started talking to me about what's happening in the Labour Party. He wasn't even given an opinion either way, but he wanted a conversation. Now, 2 years ago, he wouldn't have wanted a conversation. He would have talked about football. He wouldn't have talked about politics. And it does remind me about in the 80s, where virtually every pub in Liverpool had a city treasurer, because there was always one bloke who'd actually done all the research, done all the figures, and said, well, I found this and I found that. And it was great that people wanted to get involved in that, and they are wanting to get involved now on a national basis. So the first and foremost thing, I think that Jeremy Corbyn and his allies have actually got a politicisation, not just within the Labour Party, but within the country as a whole, and that's got to be a good thing.
And that's fine, except that all the opinion polls suggest he can't win.
Well, I mean, it really is strange, this, isn't it? Because every single Tory newspaper, the BBC and others, who certainly have got no love and never have had any love for the left, suddenly are saying that it's unwinnable. The same ones are spending every moment of the time in attacking him with the most vicious campaign that I've seen since the 80s and worse. Now, let's be honest. If he was so unelectable and it was so unwinnable, then the Tory newspapers, the likes of the Mail and others, would be sitting back and saying, let him carry on, because this will guarantee the Tories will actually win. The reality is that the reason why they are so opposed to him, they're so vicious in their condemnation for him, is they actually do think not only he could win, but he could win by a big majority.
Well, it's